Move on to the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb will be found kind of up against the inferior side of the frontal lobe, and you'll see that the nerves are this white color, okay? So the rest of the brain is almost like a yellowish color, whereas the nerves are much more white, okay? You can see nerves down here as well. You don't need to know the cranial nerves, you just need to know the ones included on the dissection model list, so simply the olfactory bulb, optic nerve, and optic chiasm, all right? With that said, you probably will see you will see cranial nerves present, so feel free to kind of try to guess what they are if you see them. So again, here we have our olfactory bulb, then we have our optic nerve coming out here. Most of the optic nerves on our sheep are going to be cut, so I'll kind of switch the inferior view so you can see what that would be like. Just to reorient you, here's the front of the brain, or the anterior portion with the frontal lobes, and these two big white spots would be our olfactory bulbs. And then right here, we'd have our optic nerve. Now, most of ours are cut right here, kind of right where that 4 is, so we don't have these nice long optic nerves coming off of most of the brains. It just starts at the optic chiasm, which is this X portion right here. So you may simply have an optic chiasm present and not optic nerve presence on your models. All right, a few more things we can see externally. Just below the optic chiasm, we have the pituitary gland. You'll find the pituitary gland embedded in the meningeal layer. So right here you can see where it's pointing to. There's actually going to be a meningeal layer, kind of like a sheet on the bottom portion of the brain. The pituitary gland will be embedded in that, so be very careful not to just rip that off thinking you don't need it, because you do. Right? That's where the pituitary gland is. Now the infundibulum comes out kind of anteriorly from the pituitary gland. So in order to see where the infundibulum, the best thing to do is kind of just push the pituitary gland, or like pick it up and pull it back slightly, and you'll see that connection point between the optic chiasm and the pituitary gland right there. That'll be your infundibulum. Right there. So we aren't going to be able to see the mammillary body externally, or well enough to identify it, so I only want you to worry about it internally. But the cerebral peduncles will be external. To either side of the pituitary gland, if you lift up the meninge, you'll see the peduncle. So remember back to when we were talking about the brains and looking at the brain models, the cerebral peduncle was that striated area. So it looked like someone took a comb and combed it. You'll see that same structure here, except instead of seeing like actual indentations, you're going to see striations with these dark strings. So can you guys see those dark strands right there? Those are going to make up the borders of the striations that you see on the cerebral peduncle. So look for those on either side of the pituitary gland for that. All right, so actually one more thing I'm going to show you. We're going to flip to the posterior. Yeah, okay, so we're going to flip to the posterior, and you actually can see a number of things posteriorly, so I want to point these out just in case it does show up on the exam. If you look at the posterior section of the brain, so basically between that occipital lobe and the cerebellum, you can see the colliculi and the pineal gland. So right here, this would be the inferior colliculus. Above it would be the superior colliculus, and above that would be the pineal gland. All right, so this may be a view that you see. Likely not, but just in case, it's right there. All right, so now we'll switch to the sagittal view. All right, so here's